At the start of every year, something interesting happens. The gyms fill up, calendars reset, people decide that this is the year things finally change. And for a moment, it actually works. You see new faces in the gym every day, people show up consistently, there's energy, there's momentum. But as the weeks go by, the crowd starts to thin. If 10 people signed up in Jan, maybe only one of them is still showing up consistently months later. And that pattern says a lot about how we make decisions as humans. Most people don't fail because they lack intention, they fail because their decisions are built on motivation. Now, motivation is powerful, but it is temporary. It's often tied to a moment, a date, an emotion, a promise made during a sudden burst of inspiration, New Year's, a breakup, a bad picture, or a sudden realization. And once that moment fades, so does the behavior. Back to the gym example. Someone realizes that they're unhappy with their body ahead of an event, and so they decide they're going to start going. Now, at first, everything feels new. The decision feels strong, but obviously, life happens. They miss a few days, they feel sore, they fall out of rhythm. And all of a sudden, they're waiting for motivation to come back. But it doesn't. Because motivation was never meant to last. Which is why I think there's a ceiling to decisions that rely on external triggers. Like, they help you get started, but they don't help you continue. What actually creates consistency is internal commitment. And more importantly, the system that you build around it. Because here's an interesting thought. If someone made the same fitness decision in November instead of January and started the very next week, there's no novelty attached to that idea. There's no social pressure. There's no collective momentum. It's just a private promise to yourself. And when decisions are internalized like that, they tend to last longer because they don't depend on the world reminding you who you want to be. And I've noticed this pattern in my own life too. Almost every habit that I try to build based on external influence, like friends, environment, and trends, those faded. But the habits that I try to build by changing my environment instead of fighting my impulses, those stuck around. For example, there was a time when I surrounded myself with people who loved partying, going out, and staying up late. And even though that lifestyle didn't align with who I wanted to become, I went along with it. Not because I enjoyed it, but because it was, frustrating and exhausting to consistently say no. And obviously because your willpower also has its limits. But when I started curating my environment and started surrounding myself with friends who thought like me, the decision became effortless. I don't have to resist temptation. The temptation just wasn't there. I'd actually have to go out of my way to do something that didn't align with me anymore. And the same applies to food. When I'm trying to cut weight, I don't rely on discipline. I just don't stock groceries with options. I just buy what I need. And this is what effective decision making looks like. Not fighting yourself every day, but designing an environment where the right decisions are the easiest to make. Because growth depends on repetition, and repetition depends on environment, whether it's fitness, finance, creative work, or even showing up for yourself emotionally. And that is why doing these weekly monologues feel natural to me. Like, I don't wake up and ask myself if I feel like doing it. I know which days are for reflection, which days are for recording, and which days are for editing. There is no decision to make. And once your brain accepts a structure, it stops resisting it. And at some point, not doing the thing feels stranger than actually doing it. So what's the takeaway, you might ask? Well, let's start with this. Build environments that reward the behavior that you want. Remove the need for willpower. Remove optionality. And instead of depending on motivation, depend on systems. Because systems don't care how you feel. And that is exactly why they work. Most people spend their life asking, how do I stay motivated? When the right question is, why does my life require so much motivation in the first place? Fix that, and suddenly progress becomes normal. So, thank you for listening as always. I'll see you guys next week.